You know that moment when you find secret papers that change everything? That's exactly what happened when I discovered my in-laws' real plan. But before I tell you about the papers, let me start from the beginning. Because what they tried to do to me was so sneaky, so calculated, that even now I can barely believe it happened. But before I get started, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop a comment and let me know. I love seeing how far my stories reach. It all started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee, enjoying the quiet before Ben left for work. The sun was streaming through my yellow curtains, the ones I had picked out myself and absolutely loved. Ben's phone rang, and I could tell from his voice it was his mother. "Mom, what's wrong?" His voice got worried fast, the way it always did when Pam Caldwell called, sounding upset. I couldn't hear her exact words, but I could hear the panic in her voice through the phone. Ben's face changed from worried to surprised to something I couldn't quite read. "Of course you can stay with us," he said without even looking at me. "As long as you need." My heart sank a little. Don't get me wrong. I loved Ben's parents. Dave and Pam had always been kind to me during our 3 years of marriage. But they were also the type of people who had opinions about everything. Strong opinions. When Ben hung up, I looked at him with raised eyebrows. "What's going on?" "Mom and Dad need to stay with us for a while. There was some kind of water damage at their house in Lakeside. A pipe burst in their basement and flooded everything." "Oh no," I said, genuinely concerned. "How bad is it?" "Pretty bad, I guess. They can't stay there while repairs are being done." Mom sounded really upset. I nodded and poured my coffee. "How long is a while?" Ben shrugged. "She said a few weeks. Maybe a month at most. They just need time to get everything fixed and dried out." What else could I say? They were family. And they had always been good to us, even if Pam did have a tendency to rearrange my spice rack every time she visited. But something felt off about the whole situation. 2 days later, they arrived at our front door with more bags than I expected for a short stay. Dave was pulling suitcases from their car while Pam stood on our porch with her arms full of boxes. "3 suitcases each?" I whispered to Ben. He shrugged. Maybe they needed to pack a lot because they don't know exactly how long repairs will take. "Ellie, dear," Pam said, setting down her boxes to hug me tight. "Thank you so much for taking us in during this difficult time. We promise we won't be any trouble." Dave nodded and shook my hand firmly. "We're grateful, really. And we won't just sit around being useless. We'll help out however we can. In fact, we might even make things better around here." That comment stuck with me like a splinter. Make things better around here? What was wrong with how things were? But I smiled and helped them carry their bags to our guest room. "Make yourselves at home," I said. "Whatever you need." For the first week, everything seemed perfectly normal. They were polite, helpful guests who cleaned up after themselves and even cooked dinner a few times. Pam made her famous pot roast one night, and Dave fixed a squeaky hinge on our front door that had been annoying me for months. I started to relax. Maybe having them stay with us wouldn't be so bad after all. But then the comments started. It began small, so small I almost missed it. Little observations that seemed harmless at first. "Ellie, honey," Pam said one morning as we sat drinking coffee in the living room. She was looking around the space with a thoughtful expression. "These curtains are lovely, but they're a bit dark for such a bright space, don't you think? Maybe something lighter would really open things up and make the room feel bigger." I looked at my yellow curtains. The ones I had spent weeks picking out. The ones that made me happy every morning when the sun came through them. "I like them," I said softly. "Oh, of course you do, dear. They're very pretty. I'm just thinking out loud. You know, with my years of decorating experience, I tend to notice these things. It's probably just me being too picky." She said it so sweetly, with such a loving smile, that I felt bad for being defensive. "I mean, I'm always open to suggestions," I said, trying to be gracious. "That's what I love about you, Ellie. You're so open-minded and willing to learn." Later that same day, Dave wandered into the kitchen while I was putting away groceries. "Your pantry organization is very interesting, Ellie," he said. peering into the open door. Very creative. Though I have to say, there might be a more efficient way to arrange things. You know, group like items together, put the most used things at eye level. That sort of thing. I had organized my pantry the way that made sense to me. Canned goods on one shelf, boxes on another, snacks where I could reach them easily. It worked fine. It seems to work okay, I said. Oh, I'm sure it does. I'm just thinking there might be a system that works even better. But hey, what do I know? I'm just an old man with too many opinions. He laughed like he was making a joke, but his eyes were serious as he studied my pantry shelves. When Ben came home that evening, he found his parents and me in the kitchen making dinner together. How was everyone's day? He asked, kissing my cheek. Great, Pam said brightly. We were just talking about some little improvements that might make the house even more comfortable. Improvements? Ben looked interested. Nothing major, Dave said. Just some organizational ideas. Your mom and I have picked up a few tricks over the years. Ben nodded enthusiastically. That sounds great. Mom and Dad know about this stuff. Ellie, we should listen to them. My stomach twisted slightly, but I smiled and said, sure, I'm always open to suggestions. That was my first mistake. Asterisk. The suggestions kept coming after that. Every day brought new helpful ideas about my house, my cooking, my decorating, even how I folded the laundry. The spice rack would be so much more convenient over here by the stove. This recipe is good, but I think it needs just a touch more salt. And maybe some herbs. These throw pillows are pretty, but they don't really match the couch very well, do they? The way you load the dishwasher is fine, but there's actually a more efficient way that gets things cleaner. Your cleaning routine is thorough, but I know a few shortcuts that might save you time. Each comment felt like a tiny paper cut. Individually, they seemed harmless, even helpful. But together, they added up to a constant message that nothing I did was quite right. That I was an amateur who needed guidance from more experienced adults. The worst part was how they delivered these suggestions. Always with a smile, always with love, always with the disclaimer that they were just trying to help or just thinking out loud. It made me feel terrible for getting annoyed. And Ben loved it. He was so happy that his parents were taking an interest in our home and trying to help me become a better homemaker. He'd come home from work, eager to hear about what improvements they'd suggested that day. After 2 weeks of this, I was exhausted from trying to please everyone. I felt like I was constantly being tested and constantly failing. Even worse, I was starting to doubt myself. Maybe my curtains were too dark. Maybe my pantry was disorganized. Maybe I really didn't know what I was doing. That's when I made the discovery that changed everything. I was looking for stamps in Ben's desk drawer, something perfectly innocent that I'd done 100 times before. But this time, my fingers brushed against a folder I'd never seen before. It was tucked behind some old bank statements, hidden but not completely concealed. The folder was marked house plans in Dave's neat handwriting. Curious, I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were real estate listings for homes in our neighborhood. Big homes, expensive homes. All of them were circled in red pen with notes written in Dave's familiar script. Too small for extended family. Only 3 bedrooms. Kitchen needs work but good bones. Could expand. Perfect size for our needs, 5 bedrooms. Finished basement. Great potential. Large lot for additions. My hand started shaking as I flipped through page after page of house listings. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note on Dave's personal letterhead. Plan A. Convince Ben and Ellie to sell current house and buy bigger ones suitable for extended family living. Plan B. Renovate current house to accommodate long-term multi-generational living arrangement. Timeline. 6 to 8 months for full implementation. I read those words 3 times before they sank in. They weren't here because of water damage. They were here to take over our house. Or at least take over our lives. The helpful suggestions weren't meant to help me at all. They were meant to break down my confidence so I'd let them make all the decisions about our home. Every criticism of my decorating, my organizing, my cooking, It was all part of a plan to convince Ben that I couldn't handle our house properly. My legs felt weak. I sat down hard in Ben's desk chair, still holding the folder. How long had they been planning this? Had they ever really had water damage, or was that just an excuse to move in with us? And Ben, did he know? Was he part of this plan? I put the folder back exactly where I found it, my mind racing. I needed time to think, to figure out what to do with this information. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them take over my home without a fight. That night at dinner, Pam brought up the curtains again. Ellie, you know those light blue curtains I mentioned? I saw some beautiful ones at the store today. They were on sale and they would really brighten up the living room so much. What do you think? I looked around the table. Ben was nodding encouragingly. Dave was watching me with interest. And Pam was smiling that sweet, helpful smile that I now knew was completely fake. You know what? I said, putting down my fork and smiling back at her. You're absolutely right. I should definitely get new curtains this weekend. Ben looked surprised. I never agreed with his parents' suggestions that easily. Really? Pam seemed shocked too. Of course, I said brightly. You have such wonderful taste and so much more experience than me. I trust your judgment completely. The next day, I went shopping for curtains. But instead of the light blue ones Pam had suggested, I went to 3 different stores until I found the most hideous curtains I could possibly imagine. They were bright orange with giant purple flowers. The fabric looked like it had been designed by someone having a bad acid trip. They were so ugly that even the store clerk asked if I was sure about my choice. Oh yes, I told her. These are perfect. When I hung them up that evening, the whole family gathered in the living room to see the results. Oh my, Pam said, her face turning pale. They're very bright. I love them. I announced cheerfully. You were so right about needing lighter curtains. These definitely brighten up the room, don't they? Dave cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe they're a little too bright? Too bright? I looked genuinely confused. But you said my old curtains were too dark. So if light curtains are good, then really light curtains must be even better. Right? Ben looked like he was having trouble processing what he was seeing. The curtains were so aggressively ugly that they seemed to hurt people's eyes. But here's the beautiful part. Pam and Dave couldn't complain without admitting that their original suggestion had been wrong. They were trapped by their own fake helpfulness. They're very cheerful, Pam managed to say. Exactly. Thank you for helping me see that the room needed more cheer. The next morning, Dave mentioned the pantry organization again. Ellie, about that pantry system we discussed. Oh yes. I interrupted enthusiastically. I reorganized everything last night. Come see. I had indeed reorganized the pantry. But instead of grouping like items together as he'd suggested, I had arranged everything by color. All the red items together, all the blue items together, all the yellow items together. It looked like a rainbow, but it made absolutely no practical sense. The ketchup was with the tomato sauce and red pasta boxes. The mustard was with the corn and yellow cake mix. Finding anything required searching through multiple sections. This is interesting, Dave said slowly, staring at the colorful chaos. I followed your advice about being more organized, I said proudly. Isn't it beautiful? Everything is so neat and tidy now. And it's so much more visually appealing than before. Again, he couldn't complain without admitting that his suggestion had been bad. But I could see the frustration building in his eyes. Over the next few days, I followed every single piece of advice they gave me. But I followed it in the most extreme, impractical way possible. When Pam suggested I needed more plants to liven up the living room, I filled the space with fake plants. Dozens of them. Big ones, small ones, hanging ones, floor plants. The room looked like a plastic jungle from a discount store. Don't they add so much life to the space? I asked Pam as she stared in horror at the forest of artificial greenery. When Dave said the spice rack should be moved to a more convenient location, I moved it to the most inconvenient spot I could think of, on top of the refrigerator where no one could reach it without a stepladder. Now it's out of the way and doesn't clutter the counter. I explained when he asked why I needed a ladder to get salt. When they suggested I try some new recipes to expand my cooking skills, I chose the most complicated, time-consuming dishes I could find. Meals that took 6 hours to prepare and used every pot, pan, and utensil in the kitchen. I'm learning so much, I'd announce as I spent entire days cooking elaborate French dishes that none of us really wanted to eat. Ellie, Pam said carefully after a week of my extreme helpfulness. Maybe you don't need to follow every suggestion quite so thoroughly, but I want to learn from you, I said with wide, innocent eyes. You both know so much more than me about running a household. I'm just a beginner at all this. I need all the help I can get. Ben was starting to notice that something was off. Our house was turning into a bizarre funhouse of orange curtains, rainbow pantries, plastic plants, and unreachable spices. Honey, he said one evening as we got ready for bed, why are there so many plants in the living room? I can barely find a place to sit. Your mother suggested I needed more greenery to liven up the space. I wanted to make sure I had enough. And why are the curtains so bright they hurt to look at? Your father said the old ones were too dark. I didn't want to make the same mistake again. Slowly, Ben began to see what was happening. His parents' helpful suggestions were turning our comfortable home into a disaster zone of good intentions gone wrong. But they couldn't stop giving advice, because that would mean admitting their suggestions were bad. And I couldn't stop following their advice, because that would mean I was ungrateful for their help. We were all trapped in a cycle of escalating helpfulness that was making everyone miserable. 3 weeks into their stay, Pam cornered me in the kitchen while I was attempting to cook a 7-course meal that would take all day to prepare. Ellie, we need to talk. Of course, Mom. Pam. What's on your mind? She looked around at the chaos I had created by following their advice. Pots and pans everywhere. Ingredients covering every surface. Recipe books stacked in towers. Maybe we've been giving you too many suggestions lately. You seem a bit overwhelmed. Overwhelmed? Not at all, I said brightly. I love learning from you both. In fact, I found some really interesting papers in Ben's desk that gave me even more ideas for improving our living situation. The color drained from her face faster than water down a drain. What papers? The house listings. And the notes about Plan A and Plan B, very thorough research. I'm impressed by how much thought you've put into our future. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming and the clock ticking on the wall. I can explain, she started. No need to explain, I said calmly, stirring my complicated sauce. I understand completely. You want to help us find a better living situation. One that works for everyone in the long term. Ellie, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You came here to take over our house and our lives. You thought if you criticized everything I did long enough and thoroughly enough, I'd lose confidence in my own abilities and let you make all the decisions. Pam's shoulders sagged like a deflating balloon. We just wanted to be closer to Ben, she said quietly. And we thought maybe we could help you learn to be a better homemaker. The words stung like a slap, but I kept my voice level and calm. Help me be better? Or replace me entirely with your vision of what Ben's wife should be? That evening, I called a family meeting. Ben, his parents, and me sitting around our kitchen table with the ugly orange curtains casting strange shadows on the walls. I think it's time we were all completely honest with each other, I began. Dave shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What do you mean? I know about the house listings. I know this visit isn't really about water damage. And I know you've been systematically trying to convince Ben that I can't handle our home properly. Ben looked confused and alarmed. What house listings? I handed him the folder I had photocopied that afternoon. His face grew darker and angrier as he read through the real estate listings and the notes about Plan A and Plan B. Mom, Dad, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. What the hell is this? Benjamin. Language, Pam said automatically. Don't Benjamin language me. What is this folder? What are these plans? Dave tried to recover. Son, we just thought you and Ellie might be happier in a bigger place, with more room for family to visit comfortably. You mean with room for you to live here permanently? Ben said, his voice getting louder. We're getting older, Benjamin. We thought it might be nice to be close to you and maybe help. Ellie learned how to manage a household properly. So you decided to lie about needing help, move into our house under false pretenses, and spend weeks tearing apart everything my wife does until she agreed to whatever you wanted? Pam started crying. We just wanted to be part of your lives. And we thought Ellie could use some guidance from more experienced women. Guidance? Ben stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. You've been systematically criticizing and undermining everything she does. Look at this house. It's a complete disaster because you convinced her that nothing she did was good enough. Ben, I said quietly, let me handle this. I turned to face his parents directly. Dave, Pam, I want you both to look around this house. Really look at it. They glanced around the kitchen, taking in the bizarre collection of changes I had made following their suggestions. This is what happens when someone tries to please everyone else, instead of trusting their own judgment. Every ugly curtain, every misplaced spice rack, every fake plant in that living room is here because I stopped believing in myself and started thinking you knew better than I did. We were just trying to help, Pam whispered. No, you weren't. You were trying to control our lives. There's a big difference between helping someone and taking over their decisions. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where Ben and I had built our life together. I've been married to your son for 3 years. In that time, I've turned this house into our home. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't decorated like a magazine, but it was ours. It reflected who we are and how we want to live. Ellie, Dave said, we honestly didn't mean to make you feel bad about yourself. Yes, you did. You came here with a detailed plan to take over our lives. You thought if you broke down my confidence enough, I'd let you move in permanently and run everything according to your preferences. The room was silent, except for the sound of Pam crying and the tick of the clock on the wall. But here's what you didn't understand, I continued. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to have the most stylish decorating or the most organized pantry or the most elaborate meals. I just need to be me. And Ben fell in love with me, not with some improved version of me that you think I should become. Ben walked over and put his arm around me. Ellie's absolutely right. Mom, Dad, I love you both, but this has to stop. Now. We can fix this, Dave said desperately. We can help you put everything back the way it was before. No, I said firmly. You can't fix this. Because you don't actually know what the way it was before looked like. You never bothered to really see our home or our life before you decided it all needed to be changed. What happens now? Pam asked. Ben and I looked at each other. We had talked about this possibility during a long, quiet conversation the night before. You need to find your own place, Ben said. Close by if you want to be near us. But not here. Not in our house. But we sold our house in Lakeside, Dave protested. Then you need to buy another one. Or rent an apartment. But you can't stay here and keep trying to turn us into the family you want us to be instead of accepting the family we actually are. It took 2 more weeks for them to find a rental house 3 towns over. 2 weeks of awkward dinners and careful conversations. 2 weeks of me slowly putting our house back the way I actually liked it. The orange curtains were the first thing to go, replaced by my beloved yellow ones. The rainbow pantry was reorganized in a way that actually made sense for cooking. The plastic jungle in the living room was reduced to 3 real plants that I actually wanted. The day Dave and Pam moved out, there were tears and hugs and promises to visit soon. I'm sorry, Ellie, Pam said as she hugged me goodbye. We really did think we were helping you become a better wife and homemaker. I know you thought that, I replied. But the thing about helping someone is that it should make them feel more confident, not less. It should build them up, not tear them down. After they left, Ben and I sat in our living room with the normal curtains and the reasonable number of plants, just enjoying the quiet. I'm sorry I didn't see what they were doing sooner, Ben said. I should have stood up for you instead of encouraging them. You love your parents. You wanted to believe they were just trying to help us. But I should have noticed that their help was making you miserable. I leaned against his shoulder. You did notice eventually. And when it really mattered, you stood up for me and for us. That's what counts. It's been 6 months since Dave and Pam moved out of our house. We see them for dinner about once a month. The visits are pleasant but careful, like two countries that recently ended a war and are still negotiating the peace treaty. They don't offer suggestions about our house anymore. They don't critique my cooking or my decorating or my cleaning. They've learned to keep their opinions to themselves, at least when it comes to how Ben and I run our lives. The funny thing is, I actually did learn something valuable from Dave and Pam's stay with us. Not about organizing pantries or choosing curtains or cooking elaborate meals, but about standing up for myself. About trusting my own judgment instead of constantly trying to please other people. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who have the hardest time accepting who you actually are. They love their idea of you, their vision of who you could become, but they struggle to love the real you with all your imperfections and quirks. Our house is back to normal now. And when Dave and Pam visit for their monthly dinners, they actually compliment how nice everything looks. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if I was too harsh with them. But then I remember the folder of house listings hidden in Ben's desk. I remember the weeks of subtle criticism designed to make me doubt my own abilities. I remember the elaborate plan to take over our lives without ever asking our permission. You know what the best part was? I never lost my temper. I never yelled or called them names or threw them out of the house. I just showed them exactly what their helpful suggestions looked like when taken to their logical extreme. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply letting people see the natural consequences of their own advice. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comments.